sang this song to me. There was a message in its melody, sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. He said, tomorrow is another day, living is the only way. Tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be. Now the trees sang the song to me. He said the birds sang it to the breeze, just in case I was feeling down and didn't really...
Greetings. My name is Stephanie Wilson. I'm your host for tonight's episode of A Sip of Inspiration. Thank you all for joining me, and as usual, I've promised you a show of your life. Last couple of months, we've been dealing with problems that are prevalent in the community, not just the African American community, but every community. And these are problems that the resources to resolve these issues are at hand. The one that we're dealing with tonight, as we've dealt with the last couple of months, is addiction and recovery. I want to be careful for the audience at home to define addictions to meaning more than alcohol and drugs. Our society would have us think that these are the only things that have taken over our ability to function. But the way this society has moved so in the last 10 or 15 years, we have about 3,000 addictions that can include anything from being a workaholic, overeating, gambling, shopping, alcohol, of course, and drugs. We're going to talk about the behaviors of all of those, for I feel that once you admit that you have the problem, that you're halfway there. There are resources available if you do need help or you want to seek help for a loved one. We have those numbers that will go across the screen later on in the show. Also, because this is an interactive call-in show, I'd like for you to call in, so jot down the number. It's 312-738-1845. Joining me for this episode are two experts who encompass over 30 years of experience in the field of addiction. And as I promised you, we will talk about more than just drugs and alcohol. If you're like me, well, maybe you're not like me, but my thing has been eating disorders over the last few years. So those are some of the things I'd like to talk about all the time. I believe that once we can become healthy individuals, that good attitude that comes along with good health will spill over into the family. And once the family is healthy and happy, that will become contagious, and that will spill into the community. Joining me is Harold Cherry and Wayne Williams. We're going to start with Harold and let Harold tell us a little bit about himself so that you can become as familiar with Harold as I am.
Just a little bit. I've been dealing with addiction, and we're just going to say addiction because addiction, of course, encompasses many things. For about 16 years, I've been in the field of addiction, be that substance abuse. People, Stephanie mentions a few things in terms of addiction, but definitely people and how they affect you, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So that's just a little bit about me.
And Wayne Williams?
Hi, I am in the field of chemical dependency primarily. However, I've been a social worker for the last 35 years. And so I call it the people business. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of unhealthy relationships or you mentioned other types of addictions, perhaps gambling, overeating, I call it transferring obsessions, and it can be workaholism, shopping, and it runs the whole gamut. So,
well, I have a list of questions that we're going to start with. I always have a list of questions, and that's what makes this so interesting. Tonight we're going to deal with addiction from the male perspective. Last month we talked about it from the woman's perspective, and then the month before that we talked about addiction from the overall general perspective. However, I want to add to the callers at home, if you are not a male and you do have a question, feel free to call, because my guests are skilled in dealing with addictions with women, with men, as well as children.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, describe behaviors that are associated with addiction. And I don't want to talk about just drug and alcohol, because I'm learning, as the audience is too, that the behaviors are actually similar.
Go ahead. You
Okay.
can take the first one out.
Addiction is some places defined as a pathological relationship,
Okay.
and pathological meaning sick or abnormal relationship with any, it could be a substance, a behavior, or what have you. And the other caveat to that is with life-damaging consequences.
I like that. We talked earlier about an instance, in this case it was alcohol, where if a person just drank once a year, but he got very, 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 very drunk and he did everything imaginable, wrecked the car, hurt everybody's feelings, beat his wife, got home, couldn't find his clothes. Is he an alcoholic? And the answer was?
Very possibly, if all of that took place on that once-a-year occasion where he had the life-damaging consequences. If they were great enough, then certainly we could call that a problem drinker.
Okay.
And probably one of the reasons that he does it once a year is because when he does it, of the consequences. You know, it might take a year to overcome the consequences of the previous year. So absolutely.
Okay. Now, a lot of the viewers have children and family members. So if there's a change in the behavior, should that signal something to, and what changes?
Absolutely. The first thing about that, though, is you have to know your children to notice a change.
Okay.
That's one of the biggest things, and oftentimes people do not spend enough time with their children and monitoring behaviors so that when they change, they don't even know. And that's the first thing you need to do as parents, monitor their behaviors, whatever they are, so that when there is a change, you recognize it. And there's definitely a change that comes when they first start having smoking cigarettes, when they start smoking marijuana, drinking, or when they first start having sex. All of those things have a behavior that comes along with it, and if you do not know your child's behavior, you won't recognize it. So that's the first thing, is definitely monitoring, watching, and learning their behaviors so that when they change.
Now that would go for spouses too. I mean, I'm hearing more and more stories about men waking up one morning and their wife found out the wife hadn't paid the mortgage in forever, and they're actually gambling, but they didn't know. How did you miss that?
Well, the one thing about kids and adult women, let's just use ladies, they're much better at disguising behaviors, be that not paying the rent, drinking, well, not necessarily drinking, because that's something that you can probably a little easier to pick up on as opposed to when they do come across a gambling problem or when they fail to pay the mortgage, as opposed to kids. They're not as good as camouflaging or hiding the change in behavior. So and knowing your partner is very important, but over the years, you ladies have become quite efficient in.
You know, we talked about that last month when we dealt with the female section. We talked about how women will disguise the behaviors because they're frowned upon in society, so they're just much better at concealing them to avoid the peer pressure. But when do you realize you have a problem, and when you know you have a problem, is that too late?
Can I go back a little bit? I want to take a step back in terms of the adolescents and the young people before we get to the point of someone using. At that age, we're talking mainly prevention.
Okay.
If we can get into that aspect of it, maybe we won't have to get into the use part where we have to intervene.
Okay.
Because they're showing the signs and symptoms. And one of the things, when I started becoming more aware of prevention efforts about 5 years ago, working for a child welfare agency, and they asked me to put on a workshop. And I became aware of this group called Prevention First. And it's a free library of all kind of prevention tools that schools, laymen can go there. Have you heard of it here?
Very familiar with it.
And they even train people on how to be preventionists. Other communities besides our own have been doing prevention for 30, 40 years. And here it is in the last 5 or 10 years. So we're kind of late with that. But what it is marrying the business community, the social service agencies, the schools and the churches, as well as interested individuals in finding alternatives for young people. Making sure they have the educational tools about the effect of marijuana, tobacco, drugs, what have you. And so they're giving them the alternatives, that they have sports to go to, they have social activities that are non-alcoholic, they're given the education materials to let them know it's okay not to drink and smoke. Because in a
Okay.
lot of places it's thought of as a rite of passage. It's so accepted that the kids feel the peer pressure to do it. And the earlier they're trained that it's okay to say no. And it's okay for somebody, if they want to say you a punk or a chump, for you to still say, okay, well, I might be, but I'm not going to be a drunk one. You know, having refusal skills is what it's called. And
Okay.
they teach that.
So what do you say to your child other than, like I was told, if you come home drunk, I'll kill you? That's obviously not good prevention.
Well, the main thing is providing the alternative.
Okay.
If they have something positive to base their self-esteem on, then they don't have to try to fit in with the gang, the clique, the hipsters. Because, you know, again, it relates to personal experience. The pressure is, at that age, your friend's opinion of you is much more important than your fear of mom and dad. At a certain point, at
Okay.
15 or 16, you want to impress the people that are closest to you. And even though they say mom and dad gonna give me consequences, be like, but dad, do I really want to hear Joe call me a square every day from now on until I, you know, so I might just go on and do it. Whereas if I have that positive reinforcement, I got trophies at home for baseball, bowling, tiddlywinks.
Okay.
Then I'm my own person.
Okay.
You know, I'm getting my value from somewhere else. So if Joe wants to drink and call me names because I still got something I do well that I can look at and say, it's worth it for me not to.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and one of the things we have to look at too is in now in today's society, so many of us as parents don't have the necessary skills, and that's one of the reasons we fail to pass them on. And we talked a little
Okay.
bit about
That's
it.
right.
On one of our other shows where we talked about making a list of things that need to happen for youth so that when they have to deal with peer pressure, but it's also something that as parents we have to try to buy into in terms of first getting something that we can give them in terms of skills, in terms of refusal skills, negotiation skills. You know, when you start talking about it, it's definitely, we've seen over the years that as a parent, be careful with the word good parent, because we don't really know who those people are, but when you do the best that you can, and you do it for 16, 17 years, and it takes all of 5 or 10 minutes for peer pressure to tear that down, and then, of course, we cannot blame ourselves, but as parents, when we get the necessary skills to pass on, when we talk about, when we talk prevention first, you know, and when you talk about prevention and intervention, right now we deal with so many interventions because prevention did not take place early on, and prevention happens before the intervention is necessary. That means putting things in place right now, you know, for what's to come. And oftentimes, with I got 3 sons, and I used to always tell them, a lot of the lessons I teach you today is not for today. And that's important that they understand that and what that means, because that day will come when they say, oh, this is what he meant, and this is what he was talking about. So as parents, when we're able to get those parents involved so that they can learn as the children learn, then we can really deal with our youth and dealing with substance abuse and so forth. So it's important.
Now, is addictive behaviors contagious? And are they generational?
I would say, well, you have to be, when you start talking about what's contagious and when you start talking about hereditaries and those sort of things that come through the genes, a lot of behaviors can be contagious. You know, if you sit in a room with an individual and they doing one particular thing, you could very well pick up on a habit. You know, we're not going to say whether it's bad or good, but you can pick up on a habit. So in certain situations, it can become, what was the word you used?
Contagious.
Contagious. It can
now,
become
I know of one
contagious.
behavior that people don't even think of, and it's not related to drugs or alcohol or any of the substance abuses that's contagious. And I mean, have you ever met people who complain all the time?
Oh.
And then you meet their family and they complain all the time. And then you meet, or people who are depressed all the time, they've got poor self-esteem. Then you meet their family members and they have poor self-esteem too.
Absolutely.
So it seems like family is a good incubator for those kinds of poor behaviors to catch on.
It is.
Some of those are learned behaviors. To go back to the addictions piece, you know, there's data. We talk about nature versus nurture. Nature being, is there a gene or is there some kind of biological, biopsychosocial piece that contributes to it? And studies show that there is. You know, if you come from a long family of alcoholics, you have a gene. But conversely, or should I say in addition to, there's a social component of nurturing. And you just pointed out, if I come from a family of people that are depressed, that tend to be depressed, more than likely I've learned some depression. There's a thing called learned helplessness.
Right.
Where we talk about 3 or 4 generations of people, low income, no income, undereducated, underemployed, and the fact that they have been told that they can't achieve, and they bought into it. And so there's a psychiatric term called poverty of thought.
Right.
And it means just ain't nobody home.
Right.
It doesn't mean that there's no capacity for that to happen. We all know. But they've been trained to that extent. So yeah, there's some learned behaviors that are negative as well as you can learn positive behaviors.
Absolutely.
What are some of the myths surrounding addictions? One of them is I can talk about financial addictions or shopping addictions. One of them I find is people believe that if they pay the minimum on their credit card, that everything's all right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, when you put it,
Okay, and that's not true.
it is not true.
And they think that if it was on sale, that it was a good deal. But if you don't have any money or you can't afford it, if it's on sale, it's not a good deal.
Yeah. I guess when you start talking about when you start talking about the myths surrounding addiction, and when you look at the larger picture, and not just dealing with substance abuse, but definitely dealing with credit card addiction, and we say that because if this is when you know you got a credit card addiction, you pay the minimum $20, and before it can post, you at the place spending the minimum $20.
$20, that's right.
You know, then you have a problem with that. And again, it goes back into the mythical sense that'll get paid off, and paying that minimum, and that's all they ask you for. It'll never happen. Same thing happens with when you're going out on the boat. A functional gambler. And I use this term, that's from my own experience when you're talking about a functional gambler, some of the myths about not being addicted when you talk about gambling. If you go on the boat one day and lose your whole entire paycheck, then there's a problem. That's one of the myths that we often have. So it's quite a few
It's one of
things
those
surrounding.
life-damaging problems.
There you go. There you go. So that's what you have to look at. If it's life-damaging, then, you know, and that's one of the things you talk about myths we have to remove is any of those things. Whenever that happens, that's a problem.
One of the biggest myths that I would like to point out is once an addict, always an addict. And that's what I grew up thinking. That was the school of thought then. And gratefully, I know now that there are thousands, if not millions of people recovering from various addictions, and primarily alcohol and drugs, so that help is available, you know, recovery is possible, and we need to spread the word because
Absolutely.
we used to feel like a person was doomed, and it's just not that way anymore.
Now, we talked a little bit about the differences in the behaviors addiction between men and women, being that women are better at concealing the behavior than men. Women are not so apt to talk about it either because they have to conceal it. What are some of the other differences in behaviors?
One of the things about concealing, early in the game, most people are able to conceal, men and women alike.
Okay.
But as the addiction progresses, then so does the defense system or the ability to conceal. So I think that's kind of like the same, and of course it varies with individuals in terms of being able to conceal it, but because it progresses quicker with some than others. So as the addiction progresses, then the defenses begin to fall, the ability to hide. I can talk about some years back, I had some people that I knew that thought no one else knew, but they had truly lost their ability to hide. And I think that works the same in men and women. It just depends on the individual and how quickly the addiction, and when we say addiction, again, we're not just talking about substances, alcohol and drugs, we're talking about period, because even with the boat experience, it can sometimes go from 0 to 100 in a matter of a very, very short time because of, when you're talking about addiction, the excitement you get from
That's
it.
right.
It's the
That's right.
adrenaline, the rush, the same thing you get when you use any type of drugs.
That's right.
And we talk about people, it's like when that certain person comes into the room and you feel this adrenaline
Right.
rush. You know, you
Right.
like, whoo,
Ooh,
you know,
right.
and that works both ways because sometimes certain people come in the room and you be like, this ain't this, you know.
Right.
So it works both ways when you get that rush, you know, when you get that adrenaline rush. So when you talk about different addictions, and again, just making sure that people understand, we're not just talking about substances, we're talking about a lot of things that occur in life.
So we've got a caller on the line. Good evening.
Good evening. I just wanted to say one thing that I really appreciate what you guys are talking about because it spans across all different areas of our lives. But we first have to realize that, one, we are all creatures of habit to begin with. Every addiction is a habit that we form, which is conducive to the environments that we are around. Now, I believe that if we can get a message out to more people that, one, an addiction is something that can be overcome, and the term that they say, once an addict, always an addict, I completely disagree with that. And in the sense, let's go back to the basic fundamentals of understanding ourselves. Look inside ourselves, reach to our spirit. And that's where we can begin to spread a more positive word and then be a stronger example to set forth a better path of recovery and fulfillment of our spiritual selves. And that's where we can begin to elevate.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Now, go ahead.
I'd like to just touch on the male-female piece in terms of women may be a little bit better at hiding various addictions, such as perhaps the gambling, for example, or even chemical dependency. But the reason for that, I believe, is that they have more at stake in keeping it secret. Men, by virtue of their gender, have a cockier attitude in terms of, oh, well, you know, if I get caught gambling, you know, it's part of me being a man. Who cares? If I get caught, say, in a sexual addiction, you know, that's my right as a man. I can have as many women as I can handle. You know,
Right.
People will nudge him in the ribs and say, you go, boy, you a stud. You know, women, they want to call them the H.
Right.
You know, so again, they have a stigma attached to them when they have these same shortcomings. And so they have more at stake in terms of, I better keep this a secret because I'm going to be judged.
Right, but that's one of the, and that goes back to the myths. When you talk about the mythical sense of things, and you talk about that, and that's one of the things we do when we do our workshops with our youth, our young men, and make sure that they understand so that they don't get caught up in that same, again, nonsense, because when, as a man, we may see it as all right, but look at the results of it. So is it all right because, you know, I'm a man to go and blow the rent money and now I put my whole family at stake? Is it all right because I'm exposed to the same number of STDs and other things as a woman? Is that all right? And also, even we look at so many double standards, and having boys, it makes me look at a lot of them different. When she comes home with a baby, you know, that's oftentimes, I got boys, I ain't got to worry about that, but I do have to worry about that because I have the same responsibility if she get pregnant as if the mother of her as the father of him. So when we get rid of some of those double standards, like with men thinking it's okay, because it's not for me as a man to go and blow all the money gambling, and I got these responsibilities. That's what make us, that's why as men, we're not held accountable so oftentimes with our responsibility, because we think that it's okay when in actuality it is not.
Now, the caller alluded to the psychological problems. So, and we've talked on the previous two shows where all addictions start from some psychological kind of problem. Hold that thought. We're going to talk about it because I want to explore it, but we've got a caller on the line. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Esther, and I'd just like to comment on the progression, men versus women. I really appreciate the conversation that's going on, and it's very informative. But I do feel that women, they hit a rock bottom a little harder than men. Men seem to hold it up a little better than women. When women get out there, when they really get out there with the addiction, and it's really bad, drug addiction, they do things that's very degradatory, you know, and women are much softer than men. So I believe that women hit a lower bottom, and we seem to see more women come into the treatment field than men a lot of times because they're beat down much more emotionally, physically, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Just with the addiction and everything.
Thank you. And to the callers at home, to the viewers at home, you'll see list of organizations, treatment centers, and phone numbers that you can call if you are looking for treatment. All these centers are no cost, or they take insurance. If you don't have any insurance, it's not a problem, and many of them do provide 24-hour intervention.
Yeah, most of them do.
Yeah. So let's go back to the psychological part, because see, I believe that every problem stems from some psychological longing or something you're missing that you're trying to substitute. It's a key that something's out of balance.
One of the things the caller said that struck me, he mentioned that it was a habit. Whether it's a positive habit or a negative habit, it doesn't matter. There's an old adage that says, first man makes the habit, then the habit makes the man.
Okay.
So if you repeat anything often enough, then finally it's in the driver's seat. It's done without thought. You know, it's second nature. And so knowing this, you can develop a positive habit or a negative habit. And what we're talking about primarily with problem behaviors is obsessive compulsive behaviors. That's why in the field of addiction, if you look into the literature, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychological and Psychiatric Conditions, it lists addictions as part of obsessive compulsive behaviors, along with the gambling, along with sexual conduct, promiscuity, what have you, because these are things that once we start thinking about it, it becomes a cycle, and it has a life of its own. You're now into a compulsion of every time I do it, it means that I just want to do more of it. And so when you understand that, like the prime example used to be years ago of a obsessive compulsive was somebody who would wash their hands all the time, or they open and shut doors all the time, and you know, we would laugh because that's kind of comical behavior. But when you put that same kind of rule on the other problem behaviors like gambling, like eating, like shopping,
Or shoplifting.
Or shoplifting, right.
You know, or your sexual conduct, and you realize that this is a vicious cycle that just keeps replaying itself in your brain and in your behavior, you acting out. It's like a broken record. Then you're getting a better understanding, some clarity on, man, I'm really trapped into some kind of routine and I can't seem to break out of it myself. It takes, on a lot of situations, it may take professional help, some counseling. The 12-step programs are a great source of people and support and identification, helping you identify these kind of things. And for somebody to get the relief of going in a room and sitting down with a group of people that have the same situation, and folks that are further along that say, man, I used to do that too, but I'm better now.
And there's group therapy for just about everything.
Yeah.
We have a caller on the line. Good evening.
Excellent show.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay, I can hear you now. Very excellent show.
Thank you
I'd like to
very
ask
much.
you, how much, when it comes to addiction, how much of the addiction is psychological and how much is biological? And I'll hang up.
Okay. Thank you. As a matter of fact, I got that question in an email today, too. How much is psychological, how much is biological, how much is physical, and how much is emotion?
When you start looking at addiction in terms of psychological or biological, again, we talk about hereditary, that sort of thing, where you get it from your parents or so forth and so on. And I think a lot of times it becomes an imbalance. Same thing, and I'm only going to use this for an example. Say, for instance, shoplifting.
Right.
It may not be in the beginning, but when you actually do it or perform it and you get that adrenaline rush, now it becomes an imbalance, and you have to continuously feed it and feed it and feed it. And it may take professional help in some cases to get it in check, either that or going to jail. That sort of thing kind of helps along the way. But with those
that
type
solves
of,
a lot of problems.
Yeah, it does. With those type of, I think it does not initially start out that way, but it kind of progresses into an actual imbalance, and you might need counseling, or you might need some of those other things to help you get it back in check.
Same thing with food.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And I was anorexic when I was a teenager. It was the same thing. It's you know, the purging, the not eating, the sense of control that you felt because you didn't eat. And then you wanted to be more and more in control. And then you have to, one day, you know, as you get well, you wonder, what in the world was I trying to control?
Absolutely. Didn't control a thing.
Didn't control a thing, you know?
I want to harken back a little bit to what Harold said, you know, talk in terms of the consequences via the criminal justice system. I don't want anybody to think that it's a deterrent in terms of addiction or gambling or any other problem behavior. What criminal justice approaches do, they might save society. They're not helping that person. And if you don't trust me, ask anybody, whoever had a judge say, go get yourself cleaned up. You know, if I see you in my courtroom again, you know, I'm going to give you years and years. I've seen people leave treatment that they were ordered by a judge and say little slick stuff like a catch and come before a hanging. You're like, man, you're looking at 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's no match for that obsession and compulsion. But it does save society. I'm not so naive to think that, you know, if somebody's trying to bust me in my head and snatch my wallet or stick a gun in my ribs, I'm very grateful that there's a judge who's saying, look, you go sit down for 5, 10, 15, 20, leave us alone.
We've got a caller on the line. Good evening.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yes, I just wanted to add on something like the best way to get through an addiction is if you had like somebody with you, like a parent or a relative. If they was addicted or, you know, had drug problems, if they was, you know, wanting to quit with you, that would give you better motivation to quit yourself because, you know, you have somebody there with you.
Absolutely.
And it's like most of the time people that's on drugs, they feel that they're alone, like don't nobody understand what they're going through. That's why they do abuse drugs and alcohol. So if they feel like they feel like they're with them, wanting to help them, they help them, you know, live better.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
That's one of the reasons with a lot of the 12-step programs, they do what they call sponsorship for the very reason that you're talking about, where you actually have someone to go through that experience with you. And also, family support is of major importance. When you got supportive family members, and it's across the board, when you got that support, it's really, chances are better when you got that support. And that's one of the reasons so many different groups offer the buddy system or sponsorship, that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's key.
Now, for male children, how easy is it for teens to fall into addiction? For male teens.
Again, I gotta speak to this. Having worked with adolescents, as I still do now, and having been one, a black male, and also I did a thesis on substance abuse in African American males, aged 12 to 19. There's an absent father syndrome in the African American community, meaning that a lot of kids grow up in a single parent home being run by the mother. And so they'll gravitate toward a gang or a peer group of older males looking for that support that they don't get from a father figure. And until we as men step up and start providing more coaches for the sports teams or more mentorship in around the educational experience or the social experience, these gangs or cliques, neighborhood groups are going to fill that void, and they're going to continue to give our young men kind of mixed messages, a negative message, or bad information about, it's about how many girls you can go to bed with, it's about how high you can get, it's about how hip and slick and cool you can be. And
we've got a caller on the line. Good evening. Hi.
Hi, my name is Mark. I don't want to say my name, but oh, Dick, I got to turn my TV down. I just wanted to say that it's very good that y'all addressing addiction in all areas, not just drug addiction and stuff, because there's a lot of other addictions that people are not willing to face because they don't know how to face them. You know, like addiction, it affects people in many different ways, and it's just really great that y'all addressing this, and I just so happened to turn the TV and just seeing y'all on TV talking about this, and I just think that's very good that y'all doing something or saying something about this. You know, I hope a lot of people is able to hear the message that y'all are bringing, because that's really great that y'all addressing these issues. And I hope a lot of young people, because addiction now is affecting a whole lot of young people.
Yes,
and
it is.
A lot of them is lost out there, and they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know, you know, they probably heard about the 12-step programs, but they don't know exactly what they're actually dealing with, the disease itself, and what form it come in. So I just really thank y'all for talking about the issue and addressing the problem. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Before you go.
That's right. We want to finish your thought.
Right, because with the last question where you asked about males, and I often speak on this because I have raised 3 boys, not just played father, but been a father, and I'm talking about a positive role model with them, with guidance and directions the whole way. And I just had this conversation with my son. He's 20, and when you talk about even after getting good guidance and direction, peer pressure still, and I don't know if it's the male thing, the testosterone thing. I don't know if it's, again, something that comes with us, this embedded in our soul, because I had the same conversation with him. This guy is cut from a different cloth. And when I say that, you know how you got some kids you can send to the streets, some kids you want to send to the mall. He's one of those guys that you would prefer to send to the mall, because that's just the type of guy he is. He's not a street guy.
Okay.
But because his brothers and it was some other things going on, he felt like he needed to be out on the streets, and it was a lot of commotion going on. And I said, well, why do you think you need to be posted? And this is the term they use. You know, I got to post up with my brothers. And then I say, well, why? You know, he said, I just got it. And this is after all of this conversation and all of this talking. I'm like, dude, you are not cut from the same cloth. Why don't you just go to the mall? You know, because he's a mall guy. So a lot of times I don't. I think that it definitely has something to do with us as men in terms of. I want to say testosterone. Don't attack, but maybe even the testosterone, something within us that make us think irrational, even in the face of ration. If that's you know, if you can understand that. And I had that experience with them, and again, not playing father, but being a father for many years and giving them guidance, directions. And again, this is one of the things I tell them: the penitentiary is full of cats that knew the consequences of their actions prior to committing them.
That's right.
So even after giving them good guidance and directions, they still sometimes fall victim to life.
We've got another caller. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment on the statement or the comment that the gentleman made about there not being a father figure in the home and so many young teenagers looking for a father figure in the streets as far as the gangs or so forth are concerned. And I have this conversation with friends and family all the time, and I totally feel like there's been a myth, or I don't know if it's a myth, it could just be my personal opinion, that because there's not a father figure in the home, so many young men turn to the streets, and I totally disagree with that. I believe that because it's been said so much, oftentimes they take advantage of it and they use it. Because I know kids that I grew up with that had both parents in the home, and they turned out to be some of the worst kids you would ever want to meet. And I know kids who grew up in single-family homes, and they're fine. You know, so I just don't, I mean, just single mother homes, should I say, without fathers, because that was the comment. And I just don't agree. I think that because it's been said so frequent that a lot of teenage men use it as an excuse to just do negative things. As soon as they get in trouble, well, I don't have a father in the home. And I just think that that's just an excuse, and it's been said, and now it's embedded in their mind. And it's just simply an excuse. I just totally disagree.
Thank you. I think what happens sometimes, and you mentioned about there being a double standard in society. There's a saying that women love their sons but raise their daughters.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes boys are allowed to get away with more things. We don't check the behavior as often.
Absolutely.
And I don't.
Absolutely.
And when it starts to change, and they become sexually active. If you're paying attention to your child, you know. And then they have 4 and 5 girlfriends. They're now starting the habit of going through women. You have to check that behavior right then. So that when they're men, they're not going through women. Because that doesn't show up at just 21. Like I used to tell people, rapists, people don't turn around at 30 and they just start to be rapists. They're generally rapists at 12 and 13.
Absolutely.
So we don't check a lot of behaviors, and it doesn't have a lot to do with whether there's one parent or a huge extended family in the house. If the child is allowed to make their own decisions and not made accountable for their behaviors, they will go awry. We've got another caller on the line. Good evening. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, my name is C, and I got a question that I want to pose to the panel, and it's like, well, I've been clean, going through a 12-step program for about 12 years now. I'm a convicted felon. I did some time, and I came home in '02. I'm a CDL driver's license holder, and everywhere I go to try to find employment, I get turned away because of my past background. And it's a thing that I hear nobody talks about, and it's like I've been clean and sober, but my life has become unmanageable after, I've been clean and sober. I haven't did anything, and my life has still become unmanageable because I'm out here trying to find some employment. I bought a car, and I'm trying to keep this paid, trying to keep rent paid. I have a teenage son. I'm trying to raise him. And it's like all the doors get slammed in your face, and there's no hope. I mean, there's no help, So I just wanted to ask the guys, is there somewhere or somebody I can call as far as trying to get some guidance on trying to not let my life get too far out of hand, unmanageable, even though I'm not using.
Can I ask the caller, have you gone to any of the workshops about having expungement or clemency granted? There's an annual one that Congressman Danny Davis holds every year. They have free attorneys, legal aid, and they come and look at your criminal record, and they're able to advise you on whether or not it can be expunged or somehow.
Yeah, I was at the last one they held. Me and about 15 more other people. I was over at Austin High School. Once I went over there like 7:30 in the morning. When I got up to the line, it was like, well, we can't help you. We don't do nothing with felons. They were just doing like misdemeanors and drug cases and stuff of that nature.
Okay.
So I was over there trying to get expunged because I obtained a CDL driver's license. And, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get out on the road and drive. That's what I love doing, driving trucks. So I went over there to try to get some things expunged. I put in an application with Schneider. They turned me down. So everywhere I try to get employment, I get turned away. So I was just, wondering, was it anybody I could call afterwards or anybody I could talk to kind of assist me to stay on the right path?
It may be worth a try, since you do know that Danny Davis has a contact, for you to contact that office and ask them if they can recommend to you someone who will handle felonies, because I'm sure they've got some referrals they could give to you.
Danny Davis, you said?
Yeah, because he has a annual program where he deals with expungement. So you may want to just contact their office and tell them your story and ask them if they could refer you to someone who can help you and expunge your felony.
Okay, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And take, I'm not that great on the internet, but oftentimes you can go on the internet or find someone who is. That's what I do. A lady told me a long time ago, surround yourself with people who can do what you can't. And you can put that in, and a lot of times a lot of different things come up in terms of job listing and postings, and you can also talk about your background, but just stay strong, stay diligent. Don't let nothing stop you, because you find that when you get clean, life goes on, because the problems you're dealing with, you got people dealing with who ain't never picked up a drug, ain't never been to the penitentiary, but you have to stay consistent and don't pick up, because again, that just compounds whatever problems you may have. And it's good to hear that you are doing all of the things that you're doing, but just the main thing is to stay focused, continue to put out applications, continue to talk to people, continue to go to workshops, because a lot of times you'll be surprised who actually watching you, who see you and what you're actually doing. So just don't stop. That's the key. Just don't stop.
We've got another call on the line. Good evening. Oh, technical difficulty. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, with all the treatment facilities, why is addiction not taught in schools? That's one of my internet questions. And should it be taught in school?
I don't think addiction should, but prevention should.
Okay.
The thing we talked about earlier was prevention. Prevention from what? From addiction. We just don't want to confine addiction to substance abuse.
That's right.
If you could talk about addiction and compulsion in the school early on, prevention, again, not waiting until there's a problem, but early prevention and intervention on addiction across the board, I think we will have a lot less problem, because oftentimes when they run into eating disorders, when they run into shopping and that all of that stuff can start very early. So I think if we start across the board dealing with those issues, I think we'll have a lot less problems.
Yeah, and when it comes to eating disorders, people would be surprised to know just how many websites you can tap into that promote eating disorders, that actually promote and push the benefits of anorexia.
I've heard
and you don't see it because we don't ever think of an eating disorder, especially in the African American community. But we do have that. And if you knew the consequences early on, when you considered that, you would probably make a different choice. And the same thing with money. I think that we wouldn't, if we understood the damage financially early on, perhaps we wouldn't be led down the road of gambling or shopping.
I want to kind of point to some stuff that Reverend Jesse Jackson said, the money they're spending to build prisons versus the money they're spending cutting back on schools to educate not just the black men, but the females too. If you have children involved in arts, music, and that kind of development, if they have sports and things that help develop their self-esteem and help give them a positive sense of self, then they're not as apt to turn to not only the drugs and alcohol, but to other self-destructive behaviors like gambling, like even overeating, because they're soothing themselves with food.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's just a travesty that the administration of the politicians and whoever the powers may be don't honor the fact that we need to give children positive options. When they don't have them, they're going to sink to whatever it is that's available. Most ready. I call them the bottom feeders. When I went to high school and I didn't have the nurturance that I had in grammar school, guess what? Who was there to welcome me? The bottom feeders.
Absolutely.
They said, come on with us and go drink some wine behind the building. Don't go to class. And that's what I did.
Yeah. And one of the things we don't ever think about, and I learned this with my boys early on, I got them into wrestling. And when we got into wrestling, I think they was in like 4th or 5th grade. And we went to this big wrestling event, and there were like 6 African-American kids, mine and a couple of others. And these kids was like 3, 2, 3, 4 years old with wrestling gear on. And I said, wait a minute, what is going on in here? And there was at least 600 kids here. And I'm talking about these kids were, without an exaggeration, 4, 3, and 4 years old. And they had on wrestling gear and head gear, but that's how soon they got started. And I think that if we transfer some of that same energy, there is a club, the Harvey Twisters. I want to put their name out there because this club is bad. And they start with African-American boys very young. And they be, they just bad. But they have grasped hold to the concept of getting those kids in young so that they can get some of that aggression. And channel it into some positive things. So again, it's important that we start really early with just the sports, the arts, you know, the ballet, and all of those different things so that our kids have somewhere to put that aggression and also take up some of the time that they use in the streets.
We've got a caller on the line. Good evening.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us now?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Tyson.
Hi.
And I am one of the parents. Hi, I am one of the parents that lost her child, one of the Chicago Public School students. And as I'm sitting here listening to you all, I am given an honorary day this year, June the 7th, 2008. And I would like for these gentlemen to come out and speak to our children. See, because I guarantee you there's not many that's listening to you all at this present time that this show is existing. So, from a parent that has lost one of their child to this violence that we're having, and it comes from all sorts, drugs and all of that plays a big part in what's happening here in this city of Chicago. So I'm inviting you all. And the gentleman, the elderly gentleman, I know you very well. I've had contact with you on several occasions. So if you could please do the honor of coming out and speaking to our children. That's where you need to be. You need to be out on the streets, coming out here speaking. Don't know if that's what you do, but I'm inviting you to something that I'm having concerning our Chicago public school students.
I'll leave your information with the producer in the control room. Thank you.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, starting early, young.
Very, very.
Now, what about the parents who can't afford some of those? Some of those programs have fees and some of them don't. There are a lot of programs that are available that don't cost anything. And you can, as Harold said, you can go online and find and search out those programs. But what can you do, let's say, if you just can't afford anything?
Well, a lot of those programs, when you start those kids that young, you get a lot. You'd be surprised the number of donations and different things like that. Also, we have mentoring programs. Even at the Southside Help Center, the agency I work with, we have mentoring programs where we actually have guys to come in and help with those youth and help with those different things. And that's where we need guys to step up, be mentors, and a lot of time it don't cost a lot, just a little time. And maybe a couple of dollars every now and then if you do get into wrestling. But again, a lot of those things, get on the internet, tap into some of the other community resources, go to them alderman offices. If there is something that you find for your child, then that's when you say, look, this is something that I need. You know, this is when we start talking. And also, I thought about the value of a dollar, and oftentimes we have to learn the value of a dollar because in our community we really don't know the value of a dollar. We truly, we may think we do, but we truly don't. And we look at sometimes some of the money we spend on some of the things that we truly don't need.
Oh, don't get me started.
I'm not going to get started, but we can, we can take
soapbox.
some of those resources and tie them into programming for our youth. You know what I'm saying?
If we left the potato chips and the soda in the store.
A lot of that stuff.
A lot of that stuff.
A lot of
that frees up money for your child.
And when we fire them up with that, and it's important, and we don't want to step on nobody's toes, but again, when you tap into those resources and then you look and when you really want it to happen, it will and it can. And we can always find people to help. It's just a matter of you taking the initiative, and when we see people who are trying, we try with you.
That's right. And we've got another call on the line.
Okay.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
We're great. How are you?
God bless.
Thank you.
I had a comment. I hear you all talking, and I was just wanting to speak on one thing concerning the matter that y'all, are talking about. And the thing about it is that, well, I'm not down in school and period, but we have a certain culture, and right now we are we've learned the culture of another nation, and we have our own culture, and it's the thing that they teaching in these schools now. That's why our children are not in the place where they should be now, because they're not getting the full truth. And when you know the full truth, that's what sets you free.
Thank you very much.
You have a good day.
Thank you.
I wanted to go back to the recreational outlets that are free or no cost.
We have another caller on the line. Hold that thought. Okay. Just 1 second. You go ahead. We'll let you get it out.
Chicago Park District is an excellent resource.
Okay. Yes.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Hello?
Hi, can you hear us now?
Rock and roll, dude.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely the Chicago Park Districts are a great source. They are truly, and they do have programs for our youth that are either no cost, or you can definitely plug into some of the other resources. They're great programs. Yep, Chicago Public Schools.
Okay, I don't think we thought about that. To the callers at home on the screen, you'll see the name of treatment centers and facilities in case you or a loved one are in need of some help right now. A lot of these centers are 24 hours, and they are free of charge. I've got We just said, I had one question. How costly is treatment for children, women, and men? But it can be no cost.
It can be no cost. Again, it depends. Once you, when they plug into treatment programs and facility, then they'll evaluate your ability to pay one way or another, and that's how they determine. They do sliding fees, sliding scales, that sort of things, and there's a lot of times it won't have any cost at all. So.
And if you're suffering from any kind of addiction, get some help from somewhere. Call somebody, even if it's a close friend. We talked about keeping a list once in a show we did before of people that you can contact when you need help, people that you can talk to. Right now, those who don't have a problem or don't think you have a problem, I'd like to meet you, but because we all have some kind of problem, write down a list of people that you can call or talk to when you need to.
Absolutely.
And then when you find that you're in a place where you need help, call those people, and they can help you through a lot of things. Sometimes they can keep you from shopping or eating or purging or using or drinking. And sometimes there'll be that person that can support you and go to the treatment center with you.
Harold brought up the internet as an excellent resource, and I would say Google, and I'm just learning how to use, aspects of it, but Google, if it's shopping addiction, say Shopaholics and see what comes up. If it's gambling, Gamblers Anonymous and see what comes up or what have you. Just some variation.
Or just put,
right.
Just
whatever your
that
addiction is, whatever your problem is.
Just put it in.
I have a problem with this. Just put it in there. You don't have to be sophisticated. The search engines are very good at narrowing down the search to give you what you want.
And if you don't have a computer, the library.
That's right.
Libraries are everywhere.
Free
and
computers.
You can go right in and you can use the system. So not having one at home is no excuse. You can go to any of the public libraries.
Our time's come to a close. I'd like to thank you all for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And as usual, I've learned a lot and my audience will benefit from it. To the viewers at home, I want to thank you again for sitting through one more wonderful episode of A Sip of Inspiration. I hope this information has been beneficial. I hope you were able to jot down some of the information that we put on the screen earlier. As I said earlier in the show, once you're whole and happy, the family's whole and happy, and then that translates into the community, which would be whole and happy. Again, thank you for joining me, A Sip of Inspiration.
Sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. Tomorrow is another day. Living is the only way. Tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be. Now the trees sang a song to me. He said the birds sang it to the breeze. Just in case I was feeling down and didn't really want to be around. He said the breeze sometimes come with rain, but nothing in life stays the same. Tomorrow's gonna bring a change. The message remains the same.